managing that giant kindergarten is a challenge. But unless you have good people, you have nothing in our industry.
Welcome to the Voice of Insurance. I'm Mark Gagan. The voice you just heard was this episode's guest, Toby Esser, chairman of independent London wholesale broker AFL. Toby is a veteran of the London market broking scene and is a former CEO of Cooper Gay, which grew manyfold under his ambitious and energetic leadership, both organically and by high-profile M&A. The biggest of those deals was the 2010 merger with major US wholesaler Sweat & Crawford, which at the time formed the largest wholesaler in the world, moving $3.5 billion in premium. AFL is Toby's newest growth project, which began just over 2 years ago. I've interviewed Toby many times over the years, and I think it shows in this interview. We have a really wide-ranging discussion, from growing an independent business and handling the precocious prima-donna-like talent that Toby just referred to just now, and we also touch on market reform and, of course, the brave new wholesale landscape that is forming in the wake of the massive consolidation taking place among the world's biggest brokers. Now, a quick note on that subject. I first spoke to Toby just before the Willis AON deal was announced, so as soon as the news broke, I went straight back to him for an update. I've edited the new bit in where I think it works best. I hope it all makes sense. Anyway, enjoy the episode. Before we get started, just a quick reminder that advertising slots are available here and in other places in the Voice of Insurance podcasts. Podcasting is the fastest growing medium and attracts a high quality audience of key decision makers. It's also an intimate medium where you, the listener, are right in the room with me and the interview subjects. Needless to say, that means it's a great way of getting your message out directly to an audience because you know you've got their full attention. It's also very cost effective. So get in touch with Mark at thevoiceofinsurance.com to find out how you could be speaking directly to the industry. Toby, why don't you tell us how you got into insurance and how your career sort of develops and how you got where you are today?
Well, I guess like most people in the insurance industry, I didn't wake up one day and go, I really, really wanted to be in the insurance industry. I got lucky, as I think most of us did. And I think it's one of the reasons why the market is such a good place, because I think insurance people understand that they've all got a little bit lucky in doing the job that they do, as opposed to wanting to be an investment banker, wanting to be a solicitor, wanting to be an accountant, wanting to be some other specific profession. I think the insurance industry, we kind of ended up in the insurance industry, and then most of us have had a good life and have done well from the industry, and I think we consider ourselves fortunate as a result. So therefore, I think it's a little bit unusual, not that there's that much humility, but maybe slightly more humility than some of the other industries. So I actually I left school, didn't want to go to college. My father was at Oxford, was somewhat disappointed that I, the third child, didn't want to go to Oxford. And actually it turned out none of the six did, which was equally
You could have got in.
Sorry? No, I don't know. That's a good question. Probably not. I probably would have had to work harder than I actually did work. So maybe not as well. But if I'd wanted to and worked hard, who knows? But I didn't. I traveled, came back. I had a bug for the city for no discernible reason. Something I'd heard, something I'd heard said. Really didn't know anybody in the industry. But I knew I liked numbers and I liked money. And so I did a Meet the City course, and then applied, stockbroker, commodity broker, insurance broker, and got a job with Cooper Gay, age 19, actually through IPS, Trevor James, who got introduced to me. And I reminded Trevor about a year ago that 37 years ago, he was actually the one who got me my first job.
And just to clarify, IPS is a recruitment consultant. If you've worked in the London market, you're probably bound to have met or seen their advertising in the press or been to see. Because I think I was speculating that they may have had an office in this very building where you are now, weren't?
Yeah, not sure. I wasn't too far away. We were in Mart Lane when we first started out in 1983. I'm not sure if they were here though.
Great. And then so your story really at Cooper Gay is that you just rose up to becoming the CEO by the end. I mean, how quickly did that happen?
Yeah, well, I think I was probably asked a question by one of our directors at about 18, 19, 20, and he said, what do you want? And I said, well, what do you mean? That's a strange question. He said, well, what do you think you're going to do in the business? I said, well, I'll run the business. Of course I'll run the business. And I guess there was a little bit of maybe ignorant arrogance, but that was certainly my ambition and my desire all the way along. So I think I got a couple of breaks. Post the Mexican earthquake in 1985, there was very little available reinsurance capacity in the world for Mexican business. And it was pesos, premium reserves, all sorts of problems. And we had a marine contract that ended up on my desk, and the numbers were a lot more than any number I'd ever seen since I'd been with the company. It got me excited. And we went out and we basically discovered a way to layer business that had never really existed in the London market until that point, and to place Mexican accounts. And for a year or so, we hit every single account that we saw, and the brokerages were multiples of what we'd ever made before. And I learned reinsurance, facultative reinsurance. I learned what that was all about at that point, which led on to, in 1988, the company decided to create an office in New York, in Wall Street, and asked me if I would go. Certainly didn't volunteer to let me see America. I'd never been to America. I'd never been to New York. I had no idea what I was letting myself in for, but it was a yes or no. You want to go or don't you want to go? So I said, yes, of course. So age 24, headed to New York, what was essentially going to be a treaty startup. I left to come back to the UK 4 years later, and we didn't handle a treaty at that point. But what we did do was a lot of facultative reinsurance business, which is what I'd learned. And the timing was great, knocking on the doors of the AIGs and the Cignas and the Continentals and the IRIs and those companies who were prevalent at the time. And we handled a lot of Latin America, a lot of multinational business. And I was really, the guy running that business. And we built a very successful business. Loved it, but wanted to run the group. So I recognized at that point I couldn't run the group from New York. I was going to have to come back to England. So I came back to England and had a few years battling to change things around. But by 97, I was MD of the group, and we were a small business still. I remember that year we made 300,000 profit. We were sub 10 million business.
What year was that then?
Around 97.
97.
Yeah. Came back from New York in 92. Initially took over non-marine business, and then gradually took over the whole thing.
With AFL, I mean, you took over AFL. That was completed in September 2017. When you said that, when you did that, you said, my intention here is to build a strong London market wholesale broker at a time when I truly believe that there's a gap in the market for that. Is that how's that plan progressed in the last couple of years? Yeah,
well, I think the gap's got bigger and the opportunity has got better. So that's great news. And clearly we didn't influence either of those situations.
And I don't want to second guess what the gap getting bigger is, but I presume is that something to do with JLT getting taken over?
Yeah, obviously they're the biggest part of it. Probably the largest London market wholesaler at the time. But the continued consolidation that we've seen, RFIB, Tysers, Integro, is but one. So the independent wholesaler, and JLT was starting to have difficulty in being called the independent wholesaler anyway with their move into US retail, but they still were a very significant wholesaler. But the independent wholesaler has got more and more scarce over the last couple of years, which is terrific. I've always been a wholesaler, I've always been independent, it's always been my game, and I felt there was a gap, and I think the gap is even bigger. The opportunity is being shown by what's happening in the marketplace, and the market getting more difficult means people are coming to London more, so that's terrific as well.
So has it changed your thinking? Has it made you want to double down quicker, or try and grow faster, or get more capital and grow quicker and do that kind of thing? Is it all about people, about not picking up displaced people?
Yeah. So people are everything. The number one PE guys say to me is, oh my gosh, we underestimated the issues of all the prima donnas that you have to deal with. How do you do that? And London market especially, even more, although you get that in America, of course you do, and internationally, London is even more extreme, I think, both on the underwriting and the broking side, and managing that giant kindergarten is a challenge. But unless you have good people, you have nothing in our industry. So getting those people, getting them fast, obviously they're more available again due to JLT, due to some of the mergers and acquisitions that we've seen. We have more availability of good people, but getting those people is the tough thing. Would I like to double down? Yes, I'd like to double down. Yes, I'd like to go a lot faster. We doubled in business last year. That's terrific. Could we have been even quicker? Yes, but when you accept that you're going to do it the way that I'm doing it, where I'm personally controlling the business, where we don't have a big institutional backer, where we haven't gone out to do major M&A on the back of PE, you have to accept there's limitations of what you can do. So we're trying to balance the books whilst growing incredibly quick. And keeping the happy medium between those two things is a good challenge. It's an enjoyable challenge.
And why not private equity, since there's so much capital knocking around the world? Why wouldn't you want to do it that way?
Because I think if you're going to do it with private equity, you should do it with very significant numbers. And when I looked prior to AFL, I didn't like the opportunities that were available at the time. I didn't like the values of the businesses or the businesses that were there. And I think that you either need to go big, and you do that with the backers, with significant backers, or you go relatively small and you do it yourself. And I decided that was the better route at the time.
Do you think the valuations, just, these are sort of 13, 14, 15 times EBITDA multiples that are being paid for intermediary style businesses? What do you think about those kind of numbers?
Yeah. Well, I think it's great if you're selling. It's not too good if you're buying. So, I'm a buyer at 6, 7, 8. I'm not a buyer at 14, but I'm definitely a seller at 14s.
So you're building something that, an organic build up, and obviously, so you said you were able to double in size last year. What sort of initiatives and things have you been most pleased with from a standing start a couple of years ago?
Well, we'll do a little bit bolt-on, but yes, predominantly the idea is predominantly to grow organically. The challenge with growing organically, we have an amazing pipeline of business. For a broker of our size, the pipeline of producers, the opportunities that present themselves to us all the time is fantastic. But especially in a difficult market that we're in right now, if you don't have the professionals to be able to take advantage of that opportunity, you can't do the deals. So I think over particularly the last 12 months, have been really, really excited about the quality of the specialist professional that we've been able to bring in. And we're finding that we're really succeeding where we've got the right kind of individual, where we're competing with other wholesalers in the London market. We think that our average individual who is trying to trade and do the deal is better today. And that's exciting because the opportunities do keep coming through the door. But we have to nail those opportunities, and we have to do that with the right quality individual.
And what's the pitch to those sort of to the people that you're targeting out and about, that great producers that you really would love to come and work with you here at AFL? What's the pitch to them?
Your company's sold and you didn't get a big piece of it. You can get a nice piece of it here. Have a track record of making employee shareholders lots of money, and we'll do that again. And it is for all of the employees. We have an ESOP, for example, so every single employee now has a piece of 10% of the company, which is nice, and executives obviously have an additional piece. We're fast growing. Be there at the start where you understand what our vision is, where we're going, what we're trying to do, where you have access to everybody in the company, top down, where you're given a very long leash, long piece of string. You can go do whatever you want to do. If you think it makes sense, go do it. You've got the backing of the company to go after that. In terms of reputation, the business that is building its reputation, a lot of people want to deal with us. That's a nice situation to go into. And you don't have to come in and bring in a load of business yourself. We already have the pipeline. Just be good. If you have a couple of good clients, couple of opportunities, terrific. Predominantly, just do your job really, really well, because we will introduce you to a pipeline of business that if you do your job well, you can take advantage of and you can grow.
a question that arose, actually, there was a really good article in the Insurance Insider the other day about London-based brokers perhaps bemoaning that we've got this great hardening market in the US E&S, particularly great for London wholesalers, but as opposed to previous, maybe what you had in 85, 86 or at other hard market cycles, that the London market has been retrenched partly. And are you finding that is a shame that you can't, the specific words in the article were that underwriters can't fill their boots like they used to when you see the price of something doubling, you can't just write 3 or 4 times as much of it as you used to. Are you finding that frustrating at all, or being London-based?
Yeah, I think I helped them probably significantly with that. And so yes, I absolutely echo that. There is an absolutely huge opportunity, but Lloyd's most especially is limited in their ability to take advantage of that. I think we're starting to see a little bit of what we used to call the fringe market, the non-Lloyd's players being able to help in that situation, a Convex or a Fidelis or companies such as that. Others looking and saying maybe we should be in London to take advantage of the opportunity that's coming into London, but Lloyd's is restricted from a premium perspective. And mostly, I would say with Lloyd's, mostly for sensible reasons. You can argue different syndicates and different lines of business, but mostly for good reason. But that business that's coming in, probably we're not taking advantage of the opportunity as much as we could do. But I wouldn't wish to be overly critical of it, because unless certain underwriters had said enough is enough, we wouldn't have seen the change market. We wouldn't see the opportunity that occurred anyway.
Yeah, you can't have one without the other.
Not really.
Okay, to talk. I mean, we've already mentioned that MMC-JLT, but maybe are there any specific ways, really things that you could point to? Obviously, it's such a big market-affecting thing. It's kind of a macro thing, isn't it, almost? But are there any specific ways that it's really changed the landscape and changed it for you?
Yeah, I think...
Are there any classes, for example, or something where you think, this has actually been a cracking opportunity, or something that actually very specifically said... I think for others, we could say, other independents would say, well, this is my chance to try and get into reinsurance when I've shied away from it. For example, we've seen that. Was there anything, where you had your strategy meeting the day after? I'm sure, like everybody else, we certainly had one when I was working back at the Insurance Insider. What are we going to do about all this? Yeah. I'm sure you did that. What was top of your agenda when that happened?
Yeah, interesting question. I mean, the number one area that I think was a massive advantage was obviously the aviation, where they were so strong in aviation and they had to sell the aviation business. And, there's a huge opportunity that presented itself. I don't think I looked at it specifically like that so much. I think what we said was, look, there is a huge opportunity to hire a good number of very professional, strong specialists from JLT who would be a very good fit for us as a business. Our CEO of AFL is ex-JLT Specialty, Jonathan Bynes, who runs the business. So, clearly he came in before, which was very good timing. So he clearly knew a lot of good specialists, and we've hired individuals, casualty, property, professional lines, across the board, and would continue to hire if we see the right kind of quality individual. I would say it was more just, here's a business that hires more people within the London specialty market than most, has better quality than most, and a lot of them are available because they handle business for US retailers. We handle business for US retailers. We are not conflicted. The US retailers know we will never be conflicted. And as such, you want to come to us when your retail client is giving you grief for where you are. We're a perfect scenario. Others, you could go there and then they get bought, or they're already part of another retailer, or they have another conflict of some reason. You're going to move the business as an independent US retailer to somebody. We're a pretty good fit.
Now, here's that interruption I told you about. This is the point in the recording where Toby and I speculated for a few minutes on what a possible AON-Willis deal might mean for the market. I've cut that out. Instead of that, here is a sequence where we discuss the announced deal and Toby's initial reaction to it. I started by asking Toby whether he thought the deal was a good or a bad one.
I think it depends which side of the market you sit on. I think if I was an underwriter already concerned about the dominance of the big three, that dominance has become the big two. And to have such a huge percentage of your business with only two brokers, I think has to be a negative overall. I think from the broker's perspective, it again is an opportunity. Maybe not quite the same opportunity in the wholesale reinsurance world that JLT going to Marsh was, but most certainly an opportunity. Great opportunity for all the independent retailers, particularly the fast-growing American retailers, but also an opportunity within the London market.
Yeah, and looking at the London market, obviously, where you're playing specifically, what are the first things that come to mind? I would presume there'd be a big question mark about what's happening to Willis Re.
Yes, I think that's a question mark. I mean, not for me to judge on, but clearly, will the combination create a reinsurance broker that is just too big? And will the regulator have a look at that? That's clearly a question. But from our standpoint, you're going to get some individuals within Willis Re who won't be happy in the merged organisation. So for us, that might well give opportunities for hiring. I think other independents and growing reinsurance broker within our arena, they're going to have opportunities as well.
So you sharpening up your sort of hit list?
I think so. Maybe not in quite the same way as JLT, because JLT did do so much business with independents as opposed to Willis much more network. But absolutely, there'll be opportunities. There'll be opportunities within the specialty areas.
Which classes specifically? I mean, things like marine, other construction, other things like that. Those are things that we should be looking at.
I think so. Most of the specialties. So financial services, I'd probably add to that. Facultative reinsurance. Some area of specialty treaty reinsurance as well. I think those all come into it. But anywhere where you come across a strong team, particularly those who either have a strong professionalism in what they do, or maybe some client access that isn't in-house Willis.
So it could really be any kind of specialty class, of which Willis, of course, is a major player in London. We could include political risk, trade credit, K&R, specie. I think the list is fairly endless.
Exactly, yeah. They've long been very good in those areas, and it's a question of picking those out. Plus, you're going to find that Aon has people in pretty much all of those areas as well, so somewhere along the line, someone won't be happy, and it's generally when you get those situations, you can get some good people out.
Speaking as a wholesaler sitting in London, you mentioned about it being a big opportunity for large retailers, perhaps almost certainly in the US. Would that then be a really good knock-on? Would that be a knock-on effect for you guys? For those independent wholesalers in London who are now supporting, or having the first time in many years, the opportunity to support a challenger retail broker on the ground in the US, who's now able to pitch for accounts that they thought they would have been certainly locked out of.
Yeah, I think so. We've all seen the very fast growth of the USIs, the hubs, the Allianz of this world, and independent US retailers who really have a good opportunity to compete on the major accounts these days. With Willis going to Aon, it gives them an even better position, and those retailers do like to use independents in London as opposed to using their competition. So absolutely, as a partner of those brokers, we would see good opportunity.
So yeah, another good chance for increased deal flow, and obviously you can take some of the talent that would have been in the Willis or in the Aon teams.
Yeah, servicing that type of business, exactly. I think slightly less so in the rest of the world, because those are very much American retail brokers, and internationally you don't have the same sort of growth of independent brokers. The big three, big four really are quite dominant outside of the US and Europe.
I was thinking about what might be. It's very difficult for you to second guess, but what would be the reaction of the big global insurance clients of Aon and Willis that up until a few years ago they had 3 or 4 potential brokers that they could use, and now they're really down to 2.
Well, again, I think much like the market, I think when you have a lack of choice, it's never a very satisfactory situation. I don't think I would be too happy in that. There are the independent networks. We're a member of WBN, and WBN is certainly an enormous network. And maybe the networks are the ones that will be able to in the future provide alternative.
That's Willis Broker Network.
WBN, Worldwide Broker Network.
Worldwide Broker Network. Sorry, I'm getting really confused. Yes, right.
The independent one.
You're a member of that. And I was going to say, no, I'm terribly confused, and we'll strike that from the record. Greg Case, the CEO of Aon, has just come on an analyst call, which is the sort of thing you have after one of these big announcements. And he said it's all about being better, not bigger. So it's not about Aon regaining the sort of top spot in the broking world, but it's about doing things better and being able to give them the breathing space to be able to be more innovative. What would you say to that?
Well, I guess that's what he has to say. That's probably what we would all say. I mean, if we just literally said big is better, that wouldn't be the greatest thing to say, and I don't think that would be received very well. Clearly, being the number one broker in the world is key, and clearly the synergies that they'll get from being the size they're going to be is fundamentally key. I'm not sure how you necessarily get a lot better just because you're bigger.
Okay, and I was just wondering, what's your gut telling you about how the market and how Willis shareholders might react to all of this?
Well, I think as we've seen so far, share prices of both Aon and Willis have dropped very quickly. We're in a marketplace where shares are dropping, so
it was not a good day to know what the undisturbed prices action might have been, because of course we're actually talking on the day when stock markets wired are falling about 8, 9, 10% because of the 30% fall in the oil price overnight as a price war was broken out between sort of Saudi Arabia and Russia. But so difficult to tell, but what would your gut be telling you?
It doesn't seem to be a huge premium. So my gut would say from that perspective, it's not like a JLT deal, which was an absolute slam dunk. It's something that we know has been discussed for about a year because it formally came out a year ago. And I guess if you're a shareholder who really didn't want it to happen, you probably would have exited by now. So my assumption is if that kind of a premium stands and continues to stand in some fashion, probably most people will accept it.
So let's talk a bit more about AFL and where it fits in with the marketplace. And obviously, when you a couple of years ago when you came in, you played quite big on wanting to build a lean and agile kind of tech savvy operation where you want to avoid legacy, which is obviously a great thing. How far has that been possible given the realities of where we are in the market and the way it currently trades?
Well, not as close as I would like it to be because of the market and because we do operate in a marketplace. So, if we took electronic processing, we're no further forward than we've been. The Lloyd's blueprint, lots of good things in there, but for me, not enough focus on the number one holy grail, which is how do we process our business electronically? How do we avoid this paper society that we're in? And we have to do our business as a marketplace, within a marketplace, we have to. So I think that's held us back a little bit. We certainly are very tech savvy. We are very efficient as a business. We are almost paperless. We really don't have any legacy at this point. We have all those tick boxes, but we've not been as successful as I would like because of the constraints of the marketplace. The other side is I would like to have been more in the world of insurtech, in what we've tried to do in that world. But the reality is a broker only really makes money out of insurtech business when there is premium flow and when a broker is finding market and sitting between client and market. And if there is no premium, you can't make any money. And in most insurtech business, there is no money at this point. I think we've done an okay job at incubating some businesses and looking at some early days businesses. But when you look at the premium that they generate, it's not there. Insurtech today is still really about process. It's about data. And until we move from process and data to actually underwriting product, it's tough for us to make money.
Right, yeah, so it's still really something for venture capitalists and brokers will get involved a bit later on.
I think
is that
so.
the right thing?
Because as a broker, you don't really want to be just money, and we are just money at this point, because it's the process things that can make the money, or the data control things that can make money. And hey, some of them have made fantastic money, and that's terrific. But ours needs to be a double dip. It's not about just being money. We're about being money who can actually then provide broking services.
Okay, we're talking about modernisation. Well, great. Obviously, you're saying that perhaps the state of how the market is at the moment has been holding you back. Well, happily, we're right in the middle of probably the biggest London market attempt at reform in any of our careers, actually. So, what's your view of the future at Lloyd's blueprint?
I think generally very favourable. I think that the changes that were made when John Neal came in really had to be made. I think the combination of that at the same time as Tom Bolt going into work for AIG, working for Dupro, and AIG being forced to make the changes that they made, created the new £800 gorilla. It kind of used to be AIG on their own in the old days. If they decided the market was going up or the market was going down, end of each quarter in a soft market, they'd come into your offices. What do you have? What's available? Suddenly that visit stopped as the market was changing. But through their issues, AIG stopped being that £800 gorilla. But the combination of Lloyd's and AIG with everybody else really did turn the market, and turn the American market, and led to the first kind of casualty-driven hard market since 1985. So that is all very, very positive, and keeping Lloyd's professional and profitable and being a place where people want to do business is all extremely promising. The wish list is huge and very, very ambitious. Obviously, John Neal has 2 jobs, which is also very ambitious and challenging. But in general, I think it's terrific. I just don't want us to lose the focus of what really, to me, is the number one issue within this marketplace, and that is making sure that we can process our business efficiently. And we've been talking about it through 3 Lloyd's CEOs now, and we need to finally be able to do that and not just say we're going to do it. We need to actually do it.
So do you think they've got the right sort of priorities now?
No, because I think that should be priority 1, 2, and 3, and it's not priority 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. So some of the futuristic stuff, you think you can leave that for the future? About capital structures and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that they're good potential things that can be brought along. I'd love to see Lloyd's involved with actually raising capital on behalf of the smaller syndicates. I think that's an exciting potential move. I'd love to see it easier for new entrants and entrepreneurial entrants. If we can make that easier. Unfortunately, what's happened recently is we've seen some of the more entrepreneurial ones go. That's not good for us. That's not good for Lloyd's. I don't think that getting rid of the follow market and the subscription market is a good thing for Lloyd's. And it's not that Lloyd's has made that a thing they want to do, but we need to be careful, syndicates in the box, trying to make the process a little bit simpler, a little bit quicker. We need to be careful that we don't lose the essence that is a marketplace. Lloyd's is the only marketplace for insurance in the world, and therefore Lloyd's is the only market that will continue to be creative. And one of the reasons why it's creative is because an underwriter at Lloyd's can make a decision on a new deal, on a new idea, on something that's a little bit different, and can take a share. He wants to take a share because he knows that the follow market will second guess him, correctly second guess him, and will say, well, we're not sure. If you can't place the account, clearly there's something wrong with it, or the pricing needed to change, or the terms need to change. So it's easier for somebody to take a lead position on something new and something creative than it is to say, I'll do 100%, where there is no additional help, there is no second guessing.
So you're worried about kind of making that follow fairly automatic and kind of number crunchy, and not kind of that element of the seat of the pants, obviously with a huge amount of analysis and all the other stuff that you need to justify it, and all the analysis that goes with that. But so you're worried about if someone's swinging $1 billion line because they've got all this automatic follow sort of algorithmic capacity behind them, then they're more likely to say no. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Because they're going to be responsible for a hell of a lot. If they knew that they're only taking a 10% line, they've got to wait for 3 other people who are equally, say they're not leading that piece, they're not being asked to lead that, but they perfectly well could lead.
Right. It's the collective knowledge. You utilise that collective knowledge, which has always been great for Lloyd's. But
the only criticism of that is that is expensive if you've got 10 people writing 10% lines who all have to justify to the PRA and FCA that they are perfectly capable of having led that piece of business, and they can justify every last box tick of that decision that they've made when they put that line down. That's expensive. That's 10 times more expensive than doing the other way. But you're saying it's worth it.
Yes, it doesn't have to be in every class of business, but in certain classes of business, I think it's important. And yes, Lloyd's base cost is way too high. Convex, do you go in Lloyd's, do you not go in Lloyd's? Yeah. It's an 11%, 12% differential. So, that is key. And I do understand and agree that cost needs to come down, but not in every line.
Out of process and things like that, you think there's more low-hanging fruit in the process and all that stuff. And so Absolutely. Get it all electronic. Do that first and then worry about other sort of highfalutin ideas.
The cost base of that is enormous. So, yes.
Great. Okay, good. I think we're putting the world to rights here, Toby, which is really good. You mentioned about syndicate in a box, about entrepreneurialism. What do you think of it? Do you think that's something that, as you as an entrepreneurial broker with MGA structures and that kind of thing, you could be sort of dabbling with?
No, I don't know that we look at that. Certainly at this stage, historically, I was very involved with raising capital for Lloyd's syndicates, maybe helping, syndicates, MGAs.
Would you do that now? Do you think that's an exciting little opportunity? Because it's, you get these businesses completely on the ground floor. You've got the chance of building the next Hiscox or something. Yeah, no, I think it is interesting, definitely, and where I do get the opportunity to help or to advise, I like that. I purely out of interest, I think that's a very interesting direction to be involved in. I think that it's difficult at this point to imagine that in the early days AFL will have that kind of an opportunity. I think you need generally a bigger infrastructure to be able to get invited into those situations. Sometimes a personal connection, it can occur like that, but it's from a personal perspective, I like that. I think it's interesting. But it definitely appeals to you. Very much so, yeah. Great, okay. I, in general, like to help people who are entrepreneurs to build a business. So if it's within the insurance industry, I have probably more to add than outside of that. But I like to help people who are entrepreneurial. Right. Before we kind of close on the blueprint, I'd like to ask you if there's anything in there. I'm kind of guessing what you're going to say, but is there anything that's not in the blueprint that you really wish was in the blueprint? There's so much in that blueprint, obviously. Yeah, there is so much in that blueprint. That's a huge amount. And if you've guessed this, you've done well. But probably my only thing is I would like to see an expansion, or at least a desire to expand in licenses. And I want the license to be like the American E&S license. So I think that Lloyd's made a mistake by trying to expand geographically and dumbing down the brand, as I call it. I think what they should have done is try to get licenses to do business elsewhere that will come into London through the usual wholesale process. For example, Mexico provides a lot of business into the London market, needs the London market, it all comes in as reinsurance. Why would it not be good to have an expansion of the NAFTA agreement and have Mexico as part of that and have Lloyd's be able to write E&S in Mexico? But not for Lloyd's to set up in Mexico, but for the brokers to access London through an E&S rather than through a reinsurance. Well, so it's about having conversations with the Mexican regulator and trying to get a proper license. Asia, Latin America, elsewhere. I would like Lloyd's to have a desire to expand its licenses, and I think that would be a very good thing for Lloyd's. I think it would be a very good thing for local markets to provide more capacity. But I understand where it might not be an fully admitted license, but an equivalent of an E&S license, I think would be an exceptionally good thing. And I never really hear any chatter about it, and I'm not sure why. I think I've got to ask you to clarify about what you mean by dumbing down. Something like Singapore or the license in Rio de Janeiro, that kind of thing. Why is that dumbing down?
Well, I think there's a couple of things around that. I think that Lloyd's is a excess and wholesale market, and I think that's what Lloyd's has always been. And my belief is Lloyd's should continue to be that. I don't think that Lloyd's is and has been a successful market for bog standard, admitted, normal retail business. That's not what it does. And its infrastructure, its cost base, its way of doing business is not set up for that. So it needs to be, and the market of last resort is the wrong description because it gives the wrong impression. But it's the market that you go to when something is too big, too unusual, too difficult, too something. And that's a good thing, and it comes in to London for that reason. When Lloyd's started in Singapore, I said all that will happen is the same brokers who try to access Lloyd's through the same business and get turned away because it's too cheap will start giving the business to the Singapore market, and it will get written at the same prices that have been offered to Lloyd's in London for a long time. And as such, you're dumbing down the brand because it's Lloyd's, but Lloyd's becomes too available. And Lloyd's shouldn't always be available. It should be available in business that it wants to write, but not just for distribution. Lloyd's is not a distribution play, as Hank Greenberg would always say at AIG. It's a completely different type of business. What happened in Singapore? Exactly that. It wrote all its business to Lloyd's brokers, but to the local offices of the Lloyd's brokers at prices it would never have written at in London.
Good. Thanks for clarifying that. Because of that, what you've just said, presuming the idea of the non-complex exchange at Lloyd's of a way of, getting rid of much easier sort of vanilla retail kind of commercial business, of dealing with that as part of the blueprint. I actually can't remember. It's I'll have to look up the name of it. But anyway, what isn't the complex risk exchange, but the electronic exchange, stuff, yeah. The standard exchange, the high volume, low premium risk exchange that's proposed in blueprint. So I'm inferring from that you think it's probably an irrelevance.
I don't get it. I don't get it. So we just got offered a very nice risk in San Francisco that is a 2000 build, 150 million building, absolutely beautiful building, and the all risk part of it is for free and is written by the local market, and they all fall over themselves to do it. The quake part they don't want, and the pricing is very interesting and terrific for London. So why would Lloyd's be set up to write the all risk part of it at the pricing that it's set up to do with the kind of aggregate you're looking at? It makes no sense to me whatsoever. The cost base of Lloyd's to write that kind of business where you have local insurers to write that sort of business. Why take on Allstate? Why take on Geico? Why take on Travelers? That to me doesn't make any sense. You have to understand what sort of a brand you are. And if you are Marks and Spencer's, be the best Marks and Spencer's that you can possibly be. Don't decide that I'm Marks and Spencer's, but I now want to be Aldi, because it's a different brand. It's a different business.
Okay, changing the subject a bit. Recently, the FCA, that's the UK's conduct regulator, took a bit of aim at the London wholesale market on non-financial misconduct and inefficiency. So you'd agree with them on inefficiency, but what about non-financial misconduct, which is another way of saying what has been happening, what been the sort of bad behaviour that's been uncovered. Perhaps it started with the Bloomberg article about 18 months ago, and the kind of culture survey and all the things that have been uncovered by that. Do you think the FCA is justified when if it's holding a mirror up to us and saying sort yourselves out?
Well, I think it's not just a FCA, is it? It's society as a whole, and I think society has changed enormously over the last few years, and I think what might have been acceptable in the past is no longer acceptable, and that's a good thing. The way that we judge people, the way that we judge actions today is very different to the way that it has been historically. So we should always be questioning ourselves, and we should always try to make sure that we're acting in the right way. So I'm 100% in favour of that. That's great. I do think that the City of London, whilst it's most certainly not perfect, it does suffer a little bit because it isn't necessarily the most attractive place in the world for everybody to work in. It is dominated by suited men. And unfortunately, the people who make applications for many of the jobs are suited men. And therefore, as much as we might try to get more women into the marketplace, it isn't always possible. So I don't think it's always completely fair to say that the city is just behaving in a chauvinist fashion. I don't think that's necessarily true. But we should have diversity as much as we possibly can. We should make sure the right individual has the right job and is employed for the right reasons. And I think a general push across society to do that is a very positive thing.
So actually, it chimes with what you said at the beginning about that young Toby Esser. It's a certain type of person that goes, I love the city, I want to go and work in the city. And do you think that's probably does appeal to a male sort of type or not?
I think historically it has more. I do think that's changing a little bit, and I think that's a good thing. But then, the millennials, as a generalism, are kind of not as into money as we used to be. So, you have to understand the way that people are changing a little bit as well. But I don't like reverse racism. I don't like reverse behavior. I don't think that's so good either. But I think we should try to behave in the correct way towards everybody, and I think we should do our best to be fair and even across the board. And I think if we're being brought up where we're not doing that, I think that's a really good positive thing.
Great. Obviously, a lot of those big institutions, you sort of expect them to have these things, to have diversity and inclusion officers and programs and training and all that kind of stuff. So what can you do as a smaller broker? Is it really just something that only the bigger institutions can really do?
I think that as a bigger institution, you have to do that, and you have to have the policy, and it has to be written down, and corporately that's what you have to do. As a smaller business, you can really actually do it. Maybe what you write down, maybe your policies aren't as official as the big guys, but you can actually really do it, and you can actually really behave in the right way.
Because and is that just down to leadership? I noticed that you've got an open plan office, and you don't have a corner office, you don't have a fancy. Maybe maybe your desk is slightly nicer than someone else's, but otherwise, is it down to that kind of stuff? Just sort of leading by example.
Yeah, I think so.
The way that you want everyone else to behave.
Yeah, I think so. I think that in a smaller business, you can see everybody. You can see everybody. You can be with everybody. You can have a knowledge of everything that happens. You can employ everybody. I used to say in the old business, fine once I employed everybody, and it was still fine when everybody employed was employed by somebody I employed. The challenge is when it moves beyond that, and you get to be a bigger business, then that whole culture, that whole way of behaving changed a little bit.
And then that includes obviously whole companies that you bought.
Absolutely. Well, whole companies that you buy, you hope that Sweat and Crawford was a couple of thousand people, for example, but I knew that their culture was a good culture. I got that really early on, and then it was relatively easy for me to see, look, cultures aren't that different, but here's a few things that we want, and to manipulate rather than try to totally change. But it is a challenge to totally change in that big an organization. So I think in a smaller business like ours, we can make it very, very clear to everybody what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. If we have some of the wrong ones, and look, we have got rid of a lot of people over the last year or so since I took over the business. If they're the wrong ones, you can get them out. And you can say that this is just not our culture. So sorry, but we're going to move on.
That's really, really interesting. And what do you think that these, this new way of doing business is actually going to improve productivity and make it easier to attract and then retain the best talent?
If you mean by the new way of doing business, you mean being more socially aware, I think that it will, one, make businesses a fairer place to work for everybody, which is really good. I think it will make it a nicer place for everybody to work, which is also equally good. I think it will make some people thrive more, but not everybody. There will be some people who won't thrive as well in a business that is like that. But it's the way that we should do it, so that's fine.
You think, and actually, in the main, it will be better. In the majority, that it will be better. That overall, it will be better.
Definitely, it will be better. I look, society is a better place. And again, back to the millennials, they have a much stronger desire to work and be involved in the right kind of an environment, to have a better lifestyle balance with their work. We maybe 30 odd years ago were more intent in, I'm just going to work, I'm going to succeed, and it doesn't matter what happens in my personal life or how I'm treated. I just want to succeed.
Do you kind of regret that? You went off to New York. Actually, I don't think anyone would regret going to New York when they're 24 to start a business. But do you kind of, are you slightly envious of some of the people who've got a bit of better life-work balance and all that kind of stuff?
No. But equally, I would never say to a 24-year-old, do you want to go to New York? You've never been to America. Yes or no? Make up your mind right now. Where do I live? Don't worry about it. I'll sort it out. I would never say that. And I think that sort of behavior today is clearly wrong. Was it wrong 30 years ago? That's a different issue.
Well, because if they failed, you'd feel that you hadn't really supported them enough.
I don't think it's that. I think you're dehumanizing somebody. I mean, they are a human being. They do have a life. They might be an employee, but you do need to treat them like they have a life and they're a normal human being. So, today we look at that sort of thing. We say, well, you have to treat people correctly. I remember one of our young guys once being sent to South America, and somebody told me that his girlfriend, they weren't yet married, was pregnant. I said, well, do we have the right kind of insurances? Well, they're not married. I'm like, that's not the point. We definitely need to make sure that we're looking after these people. We have a duty of care to them. We can't behave like that. And we went through the process and looked after them properly, as I would expect them to do. But that wasn't the case 30 years ago, and we've learned along the way. I think we're better people and we're a better society as a result of it.
That's really, really good. The only other thing I was going to ask you, which I didn't ask, before I ask you whether there's any other business that you want to bring up, being a small broker, can you actually be a generalist, or do you have to be known for a few niche specialisms?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would start by saying that what we do in this market is a specialist to start with, right? So we're not a retail broker. This is not a retail market in London. Predominantly what Next Generation is doing is wholesale business. We have the MGA in the States. We've got a reverse flow business in Manchester, and we will grow through the wholesale world. So automatically that is specialist. We increasingly, in this difficult market that we're in, are referring to ourselves as specialists. And I think the key is to have individuals who have really good specialist knowledge of the product and of the market that will write that product. Without that, you can't get deals done today. So being smaller, niche, specialist is really good in today's market. Now, I think that we can cover most markets within the wholesale arena and be specialist in each one. But we don't really try and touch anything unless we are specialist in that particular class.
That's great. I was wondering, is there anything that we haven't discussed that you'd like to bring up before we sign off?
I think we talked about most areas of the business. The fascination, I think, for me at this point, bearing in mind where we sit today, is coronavirus. And what is coronavirus going to do to us all? And this is the only conversation I've had in a long time that hasn't talked about coronavirus at some point. When you think of all the contingency, cancellations of holidays, flights, sporting events, concerts, you name it, starting maybe with Italy, stretching through Europe, stretching the States. We're already talking to companies who ban travel. There's another company in the insurance world, who today said they're not having any foreign visitors anymore. I was with Australians yesterday, who said they're going to stop travel as well. It won't be continuing. Italy, England just got postponed. Italy, Ireland this weekend was postponed. All of the Italian football matches are
that was rugby you're talking about, wasn't it? Just for listeners.
Yeah, the football, though there's no one going to the football matches. They close the doors. You start adding that up, it's trillions. It's not billions, it's trillions. And the big question, obviously, what in the wider audience, what does it mean to the economy, etc. But in our world of insurance, that could be an unbelievable bill. Who's footing that bill?
I don't know. I was feeling that there's not a huge amount, not massive exposure on the contingency, because most people, it's mostly excluded and people don't buy it back, which is silly, which I'd say is a failing on the broker that was selling them that, actually, that they should have said, you need this cover, of course you need this cover. And at the moment, you buy it when there isn't a communicable disease panic, because that one will be along every 10 years anyway, so you should buy it because this is the cover you actually need, because this is what is going to cancel your event. I can't think of that many events other than communicable disease and terrorism that would actually cancel a big event anyway. Yep. Because they're bigger than the venue that they're in. They're bigger. Some of these, like the Mobile Congress in Barcelona or the Geneva Car Show, these are massive events. That they're kind of bigger than the venue. It wouldn't just. What else is going to cancel it? It couldn't be a burst pipe because it'd fix it. I mean,
we'll see, because I agree a lot didn't buy it, but I think a lot did buy it, and so I think a lot is covered.
So it's coming.
I think so, because when you start doing the math, it is so enormous. It doesn't need that many. It needs 10%, 20%, 30%. Global economy will be affected, but how many did buy it? And I don't know the answer to that one.
What about other? I mean, I would think trying to think sort of outside the box with things like trade credit, with unfulfilled orders. Companies going bust. If airlines are going bust anyway, right? So, yep. What about shipping firms going bust? What about orders which have got deposits on them that are now frozen and are in some weird legal limbo, which underwriters may be asked to foot the bill for?
Credit.
Or where the supplier's gone bust because maybe it was a Chinese supplier where they've simply gone bust.
Yep.
And there's certainly I was reading a very good article in the FT the other day that the Chinese authorities have been declaring lots of force majeure situations that I don't know if it's the Ministry of Commerce that actually is the arbiter of whether something is a force majeure, and they've certainly declared force majeure on many things. So there'll be a lot of frustrated contracts, and there might be quite a lot of money hidden in there, and I don't know whether that's going to bubble into trade credit. So I'd go look. If I was being still an investigative journalist, I'd go looking there. So
well, you do know that people are going to look to try to claim where they can claim.
Are you worried about the politics? That's the other thing. It's the classic. If it becomes big enough, by government decree, as we know, 9/11 wasn't strictly covered, but of course it was covered morally because everyone felt that the insurance industry should pay. In these kind of situations, do you think we're going to have? When we had something similar, maybe with the Boston Marathon, I think there was quite a lot of coverage was pro bono, kind of ex gratia. Mm-hmm. Do you think we're going to have a lot of ex gratia sort of? People getting lent on to pay because it's probably the thing that's probably the right thing to do.
Yeah. Well, I think people will try. Politicians will try, companies will try, individuals will try, and at the very least, the cost of defending those situations is enormous, and we're already in a hard market, and we're still at a position where some of this reserving has still to really bite. So I think even without coronavirus, during the course of this year into next year, things could easily get worse. Coronavirus is only going to kick it on. So we might just be at the start of a proper hard market. And if we do get to that, life could be very, very different.
So, but yeah, as provided the world doesn't end, it should be quite a good year in 2021, is what you're saying.
I think so. I think there's going to be a few people looking for a bit more capital. There's going to be a few saying, well, this year's okay, but we're going to really start heading 21 and writing a lot of business.
Excellent. Well, Toby, thanks so much for your time. I know you're a really busy man. You definitely you're enjoying yourself because you've been smiling throughout the whole of this interview, and so I just wish you well, and we'll catch up again soon.
Sounds good. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks a lot. Voice of Insurance is produced by me, Mark Gagan. Music was written by Anna Gagan and produced by Carlos Gagan. Check out more podcasts and written comment pieces at www.thevoiceofinsurance.com.